ready? The Kornelia Stephanie Show. Wake up to love, your call to action. Join Kornelia as she empowers others to live heaven on earth. Kornelia teaches listeners how to be the authority over yourself, embracing your inner guru. Feel yourself uplifted into limitless expansion, integrating ease and grace in a changing world. This show will cover topics such as unconditional love, your physical body, how to be in extraordinary relationships, create financial and emotional wealth, embracing entrepreneurship in the new earth. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Kornelia Stephanie Show. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you as always. Today's Friday, and we have our Stories of Hope series to offer hope and inspiration in a changing world. And our first guest today is Megan Babcock, and she's here. She's a guide to transformation. She is passionate in helping people transform trauma, and she is a life coach and speaker. And she also hosts an empowering podcast that is called It's Your Story to Tell. She has 21 years of diverse healthcare experience and specialized training as a nurse, coach, functional medicine nurse, and design thinking certified professional. She empowers individuals to overcome adversity and create meaningful change in their lives. Welcome to the show today, Megan Babcock.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation and share some thoughts with your audience.
So we were talking before we came live about what is it that you wanted to highlight today for the audience? What's the inspiring story that you wanted to share? And you wanted to give us a little bit of a background from your story.
Sure. So for me, I wanted to just share how powerful our thinking is. I didn't realize that my thinking was having such an impact on my life, although I knew my life did not feel aligned. So I was overwhelmed, exhausted, but you would never know that if you looked at my social media or you met me. I was climbing the corporate ladder to being very successful in my career. I had beautiful children who always looked perfect. And yet I was in an abusive marriage. And it wasn't until things came really crashing down, I would say a rock bottom moment. And if you're in a rock bottom moment, good news, that is where you can transform and take your life to wherever you want it to go. It was what I needed in order to admit the reality. That's the first step for me, is if you can't admit where you truly are, you can't really change. And so when I came to this rock bottom moment and I had DHS in my home, I was very fortunate. I had a woman named Julia, who I consider my guardian angel, who showed up. She was a domestic violence advocate. And it was the first time that I was really able to admit the reality of my situation. And from that point forward, Julia walked with me and helped me to understand just how my thoughts were creating this reality. And we did a lot of inner child healing work to identify where and what thoughts began to create this reality that I was living. And from there, I was able to decide if those thoughts were helping me or if they were hurting me. If they weren't in alignment, then what do you do with them? And so I learned how to transform my thinking, and now I get to live the life that's truly aligned with myself and what I feel created for. And the work I do now is all about being able to give back what was given to me in that rock bottom moment.
I just want to say, kudos to the guardian angel that was showing up for you. Just having somebody where was the organization? DH?
The Department of Human Services. So that's when someone turns you in, or in this case, it wasn't me, but it was my spouse at the time, for an abusive incident. And there's not a lot of them out there, and I was just so fortunate that that DHS worker brought a domestic violence advocate along with them to the meeting because I had tried to leave many times, which is the story of many, most women. It takes on average at least 7 times, and that's if you get out alive, from a domestic violence relationship.
Yeah. So many, I mean, so much kudos to her for being able
Mm.
to help you then see that the reality that you were living, that it was toxic, that it was scary, that it was awful, and that you needed to get out. It also showed you what thoughts you were thinking and how that was actually affecting your reality. So I'm curious as to what were those thoughts?
So when I first started the journey with her, I didn't even know. I had grown up in what I would consider a really solid home with 2 parents, and I went to Christian schools. We were involved in our church, close to my grandparents, and it wasn't until we just really started getting curious and peeling back layers, and the more comfortable I got with her, she was in a domestic violence relationship, so she understood the way of thinking, and so she just knew how to talk to me and make me feel comfortable. And as I began to get curious and remember things from my past, I recognized that there had been things that I had never admitted as trauma or really acknowledged, in things that were inappropriate between kids, touching, sexual things that I just had kind of blocked out. And then the really big revelation for me was that at 16, I was raped and I was not where I was supposed to be. So I was afraid to tell my parents. Also, I was very involved in my church. At that point in time, there was this study called I Kiss Dating Goodbye. So there was just all of this pressure to not be honest or come forward with things. And because I didn't want to be different. And at that moment, I said to myself, I will never have a good husband.
Wow.
And I had 2 marriages prior to the healthy marriage that I am in today. Um, and both were different, but unhealthy in their own ways. And when my first marriage ended, I didn't do any work. I was so devastated and thought, wow, this is not what God intended. Then I had a lot of the religious beliefs around divorce and things like that, and ended up in a worse relationship that was very toxic and physically, emotionally, and sexually abusive. Um, but then I didn't know how to get out. I became pregnant. That was out of wedlock, so it just kept compounding, and the guilt and shame was just keeping me from really getting the help I needed and in doing the emotional discovery to find out why are these behaviors. I'm not even enjoying my life. But I couldn't look at it because I had so much shame.
Yeah, so there was a lot of healing that had to take place, a lot of realizations to have. But I love that you discovered it. I will never have a good when you said I will never have a good husband, I'll never be in a
Mhm,
good relationship. When you said that, when you realized that, and associated to something back from your past and how that was the turning point
mhm,
of everything. And now you have a new belief,
mhm,
and now you have a different reality, but you're also helping others create realities that are more in alignment with who they really are as a soul being.
mhm.
So, how is it that people can look you up on social media or learn more about you, your website?
Yeah, so if you go to itsyourstorytotell.com, you will find everything there. And there are other coaches that work alongside of me because just like Julia knew my story because it had been her story, and she gave me a lot of comfort to be able to be honest and talk to her because I didn't feel judged. She had been there and she had transformed her life. So there was also hope. So our coaches all share their story, and that way you can find somebody who really might fit well to work with you because they've been on that path. So there are 5 other women alongside of me, and then we have a podcast called It's Your Story to Tell, and we bring people on, much like you are doing today, to talk about our hard stories and how the path we took to transform our life to be able to bring hope into their life so that they can do the hard work, because it is hard work when you have to look at everything that you have been running from all of this time and start to sort through it and decide if it is helping you or if it is hurting you. And as you continue to make those alignments on your path, you just start to have a more joyful, fulfilled life. And it's just such a joy to come alongside people and watch these transformations. It's just it brings so much joy to my life to know that all things that I went through are now being used for good. And it gives me such a great understanding of how to meet people in their crisis and their trauma and their shame so that they can experience transformation too.
Yeah, and the shame is heavy. The shame is heavy. It's a very dark, dark energy. It's an emotional core wound.
Mhm.
It's an emotional core wound, and the opposite of the shame is shine. And
I
we're
love
here
that.
to transform that, to really release and heal the shame, because we are God's children and we are meant to shine. And
Mm,
we're not meant to, walk with tar. So that's how I healed my shame, is to that's how I described it. I felt like there was just tar all
mm,
over me.
yeah.
And so that's deep work, hard work, and it's good that you all are working together, the women that are supporting. When is your podcast and where can people find that?
So it's on my website, but it's also anywhere that you listen to podcasts and as well on YouTube. And we release podcasts on Friday. I'm getting ready to go on a pause, and I will be coming back with a series that is going to be talking about domestic violence and narcissistic abuse in the end of the year. So I hope people will tune into that if that's part of your story. It's a hard journey, but it is one worth taking. And you can have the life and the relationship that you were created and designed for. And that is one of love and connection and respect.
So beautiful. I definitely want to have you come back where we can have a longer discussion for, just going into the domestic violence piece. I think it's such a huge piece. We have to
Mhm.
stand for and say no, especially for the children that are looking to
Yes.
us, that are watching us, and
Mm,
what kind of a world are we creating? I grew up in a domestic violence home, so I know this
mm,
one, and I swore as a little kid, I will never allow a man to do this to me. And so it's a topic that I'm very passionate about too. I want to thank you, Megan, for coming on the show, and congratulations
thank you.
to all your hard work and how far you've come, and the work that you're doing in helping heal the world. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We're going to take a break on the Cornelia Stephanie Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for listening and tuning into the Cornelia Stephanie Show. Our next guest today is Brooke Kekos. She helps those who feel alone and lost to discover their truth and stand in their personal power using her training as magnetic mindset coach, rapid transformational therapist, RTT. She's also a clinical hypnotherapist and relationship mentor, having spent 35 years trapped in a religious sector. Indoctrination, abuse, and trauma were prevalent. She was raised by a narcissistic, abusive father, and she got stuck in toxic relationship cycles. Welcome to the show today, Brooke.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
So you've got a lot of skills, you've got a lot of therapies, you've got a lot of things that you're doing to help people transform.
Yes,
Yeah.
completely. This is what it's all about.
Right. And so
Mhm.
is this the reason why you ended up going into this field? Because you were in the things that you found yourself in your life with your narcissistic father and then the
Mhm.
religious programming and whatever the abuse that you experienced there. Is that the reason why you went into
Completely.
this field?
Yeah, I felt very stuck when I left the cult and my abusive marriage and needed to do some healing. And I was really finding myself stuck in traditional talk therapy. And so I went on this big journey of saying, you know what, this is not working. So I'm going to find what does. And that's why I do the work that I do, because I find that it is deeply needed right now in this time where people are wanting transformation. They're dealing with really difficult things. Mental health is a huge struggle now, especially since COVID and, all of the anxiety that we kind of see in the world today. So I felt like, you know what, this is why I do what I do. And I want people to break free from the things that are holding them back.
Yeah. It's really important, like you said, right now. There's so many things that people are experiencing. I think I didn't write this statistic down, but I heard about this last week, and I vaguely remember it as being the number one thing in the world right now that we as a humanity is facing is healthcare. It's our wellness. It's our healthcare. That's the number one thing because there's so many things that are going on that it's not AI, it's not, you know, it's healthcare.
Mhm.
So mental health, emotional health, physical health,
Yeah.
all of that. So I think the more people like you that are out there doing this work, it's really, really important. We were talking a little bit about grief before we came live on the show, and that's a topic that's also very near and dear to you. What would you like to say about that?
Yeah. So I've been very intimate with grief, I like to say. I like to call it my companion instead of thinking of it as this horrible thing. I feel like grief really transformed my life. It ignited a spiritual awakening for myself. After leaving the cult, I was very angry with religion, angry at God, not knowing what to believe or who to trust. And when my ex husband actually died, when he was the father of my children, that ignited that spiritual awakening because I desired to know more. I wanted to know more of why we are here, why we exist, what is my purpose. And that grief, and that deep pain, and that deep loss is where I was able to witness, instead of looking at life as, oh my gosh, why am I having to feel this pain? How can this pain transform me? How can this grief really help me look at life in a different way? Or how can it help me become who I've always been meant to be? And witnessing my children grieve, I also recognize that grief also is this way to connect more deeply with other human beings, right? In love and connection and being able to see compassion and empathy in ourselves. And I feel like this is just a way to really um, enjoy the human experience even when it's painful. And I know that sounds so backwards. And some people are going to be like, if they're in the grieving process, they're going to be like, what? Like, because they're angry, right? Always there's an angry part of grief, right? And when you're in that space, it's okay to be in that space too. But I feel like it's also really important to recognize that when you get through that and you come into acceptance, that's when you can start to really feel the lessons around grief.
Well, I think, even the idea that people have that anger is bad. Anger
Mhm.
is not bad. Anger is a raw human emotion that all of us humans have.
Yeah.
It's what we do with our anger. That is one thing. And then the other thing, when it comes to anger, there's always a truth underneath that anger that is waiting to be discovered because we're angry about something. And underneath that anger, there's always what is the truth underneath there? Because on the top, we may be angry about something and um, feel bad about being angry, but the anger is actually a tool that can be used for liberation, as does grief. Like you said, you made grief your friend. So yeah, I think that grieving the loss of a dying world in itself right now. There's so
Yes.
many, right? Because right now there's just so much change that we're going through that, whether it is that we're experiencing loss of a relationship or loss of a parent or children, pet, it's difficult. And what happens to people when they don't process their grief? What happens to the body?
It stays stuck. We don't realize that, but it really does stay stuck in the body. And that's a lot, I feel like, really connected to where illness comes from, where autoimmune disease comes from, because I noticed in my own healing journey from grief, grieving, losing a community, grieving, losing my ex-husband, right? Losing all of these things, grief sat in my chest. And when I had to actually face my grief instead of suppressing it or avoiding it, that's where I felt it, that resistance and that feeling of, that heaviness of what grief feels like. And when you finally begin to witness it and you let yourself just grieve and know that it's not going to wipe you out completely, just trust that you can move through it, that this too shall pass. Um, you start to just be more willing and accepting of that grief. And I think that's why just letting everybody know that, that you can get through this really difficult time with this grief. If I can do it, you can do it, right? We are this one and the same, right? And if you've witnessed other people do it, how can you take this grief and how can you let it teach you? And I feel like life is always teaching us through our experiences, and when we allow that, we really can be able to do it. And the one way that I did it, I felt like, was expressing it through art and creativity. And so I created a children's book called The Grief Monster. And it was in honor of my two children and their loss of their father. But what I really wanted to do was teach children the emotional intelligence to understand what grief is, to accept help when there is grief, right? To ask for support, to ask for help, because a lot of times, even adults will sit in our grief and will isolate ourselves and say, you know what, I don't want to be a burden to anybody else. But the message here is to ask for the support. If you feel like there's no one around you, well, then gain the support somehow that you need, because we thrive in connection. It's a human need. And this is how we can kind of get out of this space of depression and feeling like we're all alone in the world, because we're really not.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful, especially for the children today. Where they need all the tools and the support that they can get. I think this needs to be taught in school. I always felt like human emotion, emotional freedom, emotional processing, how to process emotion. It should be, taught in the school system. That
Completely.
should be part of our, it should be part of the curriculum, because it's so important on how to process anger and not use anger to bully someone, but to really process anger. This is great what you're doing. And, I always had the idea that I wanted to have a t-shirt that said, I'm grieving.
Oh
And
my
then,
gosh, I love that. Yes.
right, I'm grieving. And then when you go to the store or whatever, it just boom, it has I'm grieving. And so then right away, the person that sees you is able to go, oh,
Mm.
um, you know, and right away extend compassion. And maybe if you know that I'm grieving, maybe that's why I'm not smiling right now. I'm looking like this because I'm grieving. Letting each other know how we're feeling, right?
Yes. Yeah, and not being afraid to show somebody compassion that's a stranger, right? We don't know. And I think I love that when you're like, let's just put it like a sign, right? Like a sign on our t-shirt. So we can actually really just sit with people and be kind to people, because we don't know what they're going through. We have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. And yet we treat each other, you know, in not loving ways. And it's more of like, okay, how can we bring more love to this world? How can we show more support for people? And it's just like by saying those kind words, by
Yeah,
giving that compassion to each and every person.
yeah. Yeah, definitely, it's more authentic. It's
Mhm.
a more authentic way of life, and it's a more honoring way of life. I want to be able to let the audience know how they can look you up on social media and find you, and also the work that you do.
Sure. So I'm Life Coaching Goddess on all the social media platforms, and my website is lifecoachinggoddess.com. So they can reach out to me there. They can set up a consultation if they're wanting to dive deeper into understanding more about themselves, their psyche, or if they're trying to move through something so they can transform their lives.
Yes, and by all means, get that book from you. Is that book that you've written, is that available on Amazon or?
Yes, it is. The Grief Monster is available on Amazon. So yeah, you guys can grab a copy. And honestly, I've heard so many things, even adults have written me and said, "Oh my gosh, I bought this for my mother, that just lost," so it's like recognizing that even adults can find the inner child within themselves
Totally.
and deal with that grief the way they need to as well.
That's awesome, Brooke. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And we're going to take a break on the Cornelia Stephanie Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Our next guest is Bradley Hall. He's a trauma-trained transformational mindset coach, and his mission is to provide a safe space for healing and empower clients on their transformative journeys. Inspired by a significant life event in 2005, he has committed to studying human behavior and developing a unique approach to personal growth, focusing on self-awareness. Key achievements include a master's degree in in-depth archetypal psychology, certification as a trauma recovery coach, mindfulness instructor, and holistic life coach. All things wellness. Welcome to the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. So how did in order to do the work that you were doing, you must have found trauma appear in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it was early on in my childhood, and sometimes we become accustomed to what we believe is a normalcy, right? It's standard deviancy. We're exposed to things that we think is normal, and sometimes it takes a while to sort that out in our adulthood. That maybe things weren't so normal. Maybe our behavior isn't so normal. And so I experienced some childhood trauma, very traumatic things. We won't have time to go into all that here, but that led me into my early 20s, where I realized one day that I was actually in my late 20s, is when the revolution began, my internal spiritual revolution. That I realized that my behavior wasn't in line with my values of who I thought I was and who I wanted to be, and I committed to a radical shift at that point to begin to understand why I did the things I did, why I acted the way I did, why I thought the way I did, and to try to unravel that whole thing.
Wow. So do you mind sharing like what some of those things were? Like what did you discover that was really big for you, or is that something that you'd rather not share?
No, I there's a lot. There's a tremendous amount. I almost destroyed my family. So I met my wife when she was 14, I was 16, and we had my son when she was 15 and I was 17. So we started very young. We had two boys that were 3 years apart. She also had her own trauma from her own childhood. And we basically conspired for a dysfunctional marriage and had no idea that that's what we were doing. And I almost completely destroyed my marriage. And one day just woke up and thought I had to just reevaluate what is going on. What am I doing? I thought I wanted a divorce. I thought I wanted to leave. And I just one day had a moment of clarity. And that's what it takes. Sometimes it has to become so dark it's so dark that when the pinpoint of light comes through, it shines extremely bright and finally gets your attention and wakes you up.
Wow. Yeah. So are you still married today?
Absolutely. We've been married. We've been together over 36 years. We've been married for 33.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, and your kids, and so you almost destroyed, like you said, destroyed the marriage, and then you had the realization and you discovered that um there were that you didn't want to throw the marriage out, that you wanted to work on yourself.
That's right. And even more to it, more to it. My wife and I had basically grown up together. I mean, we met when she was 14, I was 16. By this time we were in our, 33, 31 when we almost divorced. We realized we had spent over half our lives together and we had grown up together. And so we committed to working on ourselves together, which ultimately led to rebuilding the marriage the way we wanted it. The way we grew up and we inherit all these beliefs that we don't even know that we've adopted. And that's when I work with people, I work on identity reconstruction and reconciliation. And the difference between the two is identity reconstruction is rebuilding who you are. Reconciliation is reconciling that with the past and being able to be okay with everything that's happened, because whatever you've done in your past has led you to here. If that didn't happen, this wouldn't have happened. And that's hard for people to understand. But my wife and I decided we had inherited all these beliefs, which we do as children, predominantly before the age of 7. We adopt all these beliefs and we don't even know we adopted them. So basically, we as adults, we've created who we are. We just think we're this person, but we actually have agreed to be this person, right? So what we focused on was, who do we want to be from here as individuals, and then what do we want our marriage to look like? And so we began investigating and researching and asking people who've been married for many, many years, the people we wanted to be like. We began asking them questions, began understanding, began talking about it, and we basically cleaned out both closets, put everything on the table, threw out what we didn't want, kept what we wanted, and rebuilt our lives and our marriage.
Is your wife a coach too?
She is not. She's very shy. Uh, she's very sweet and very shy, but she is my rock and my ground and my support. There's no doubt about it. So I guess I speak through her in that sense.
Yeah. No, I just think that there is an opportunity. I'm not saying that there isn't an opportunity to help people with trauma, because there's a lot of trauma, but also there's an opportunity, to help people stay married. And that's a big piece, because that's one of the things that, I don't know what the divorce rate is nowadays, where people really want to get a divorce, and then they take action on it, and that's not something that you did. I don't know what you were planning on doing with destroying, but even getting a divorce. And people nowadays, do they have the tools to do the work and to do the relationship work and do what it is that you and your wife did?
Yeah, yeah. And so we find ourselves very fortunate that we're here. We've done a lot of work and we're very proud of that. But we somehow found some direction. And we're grateful that happened, because it could have happened 1,000 times and we didn't find this direction and end up here. And we know that most of the time people don't know where to go and what to do to make that happen. That's the biggest thing. And so when people become in opposition, one begins to dig in and be defensive, and it causes the other one to dig in and be defensive. And then we build our defenses, and then we're never able to be vulnerable and penetrate. And we were able to do that somehow. So we like to share that with other people, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's great opportunities there. You said that you also found out another traumatic experience, that your biological father wasn't your that you thought your biological wasn't your biological father.
Yeah, through an at-home DNA test in 2018, I discovered that the man I grew up with, that I call Dad, was in fact not my biological father.
And you found that out through the DNA test?
The at-home DNA test, yes, which is a new phenomenon because of the increasing popularity of at-home DNA tests. This is a thing. There are a lot of people. I joined an organization, and I've been helping people since that happened in 2018 in this organization who discovered this information. I've been helping them begin their identity reconstruction to make sense of the whole thing and to move forward.
That must have felt like a betrayal.
Indeed, it was. And it comes with a myriad of confusing emotions, as you can imagine. There's initial confusion. You see all these names that you don't know who they are. You can't really get any answers. Everyone's defensive. Everyone's got different stories. Some people are no longer in the picture. They've passed away. Then you begin to break down all the things that you may have missed. You begin to break down all the memories of things that didn't make sense to you as a kid, but somewhere in the back of your mind you knew something wasn't right. Suddenly you had answers for all that you didn't know that you needed. And so a lot of that, with that comes working through, for example, one of the things most people are upset with is that they missed out. They have a biological family that's they're all in their 30s, 40s, 50s. They miss out on that. And we have to work through the fact that that may be true, but it could have also been just as bad as it would have been good, right? We have a tendency to make up this fairy tale in our mind. Where you're running through the fields and you embrace your biological father and all your biological siblings are around and you're dancing in the sun rays like a movie. And we all know that that's not real world. And so I had to look at, I may have missed some things, but they may not have all been good. And again, what I did go through made me who I am today. And that's what I have to be grateful for, because it's what I have in my hands.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. I want to let the audience know how they can find you on social media and look up the work that you do. And yeah.
Okay. Yeah, great. I have my first book coming out in October.
Okay.
It kind of tells my whole story. I go into to depth about the marriage. But my website, people can find me on my website at thebradleyhall.com. And on social media, you can find me with Bradley Hall. I'm also on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, and it's pretty much the Bradley Hall.
The Bradley Hall. Well,
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much, Bradley, for coming on the show today, and good luck with your book. How was that experience getting that book completed? Must have been quite a journey.
So I'm a writer and I'm working on my PhD in psychology. This took me almost 20 years, but it's evolved so much. It's changed. My mindset has changed along the way. I wanted to make sure it was exactly what I wanted to say to people. So it's been very cathartic, and I'm so excited to release it, and I hope it helps people.
Congratulations. It's a labor of love. We're
Yeah.
going to take a break on the Kornelia Stephanie Show. We'll be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for listening and tuning into the Kornelia Stephanie Show. Our next guest is Dr. Danielle Angela. She's a profit strategist, a money coach, a chiropractor, hypnotherapist, and neurosomatic release practitioner. Danielle started her healthcare career while in high school and today has over 20 years of experience in the holistic health and wellness industry. Welcome to the show today, Dr. Danielle Angela.
Thank you so much for having me.
Two first names like me.
Yes, I was just thinking the same thing, actually. Yeah.
Oh, maybe I was reading your thoughts. Or you were reading mine, who knows, but it was there. We both saw it.
Yes.
So that's so great. So wow, you have quite the wellness career, holistic health and well-being that you've been in. And you have a particular topic that you want to talk today about, and that is narcissism.
Yes. And I think having heard my credentials is so important for people that might also be experiencing narcissistic abuse in a relationship, because I had all those credentials and then still moved forward into a relationship with someone who was a narcissist, and I didn't even realize it. I studied psychology. I have a bachelor's degree in social work, and despite all of the training and education that I had, I was unable to acknowledge or unwilling to see the red flags in the relationship right from the start, really. And I continued that relationship for 12 years, actually, before enough lines had been crossed that I decided this relationship was not in integrity for me anymore, and it was time for me to figure out how to end it. Which it wasn't the first time at that point that I had considered leaving the relationship, but it was the first time that I was like really serious. I was like, I really mean it this time. Oh goodness. So that's a big part of the reason why I like to be able to share my story. And my experience, because I know that if I didn't know what the warning signs were, the red flags, if I didn't understand, all of the years that I was experiencing physical abuse, financial abuse, mental and emotional, psychological abuse, and I kept thinking, if I just keep working on myself, this will get better. And it wasn't getting better. That if I didn't know those things, then other people also don't know those things. So I think now that I'm 2 years removed from that relationship, it's almost felt like a duty, a calling in a way for me to share that experience so that I can help other people who maybe, and the ideal scenario, maybe help other people avoid getting into a relationship or committing to a relationship with a narcissist. Best case scenario, they realize what the red flags are and they're able to end the relationship if that's the right next step. And if nothing else, to just understand what you're actually experiencing, what you're actually facing. And if you don't choose to end the relationship, then you can at least develop different coping strategies.
What were the top 5 flags in the beginning that you knew in the beginning that you saw the top?
That's a great question. So one of them was love bombing, and I didn't actually
Oh.
know, and at the time that I was being love bombed, I just thought that this person really loves me and expresses love to me in a way that I hadn't ever experienced before,
Wow.
with gifts and acts of service and words of affirmation. It just felt wonderful. And of course, when you're being loved bombed, what happens is you start to create a lot of oxytocin in your brain, and then it can feel addicting. And this almost happens, it seems on purpose, whether a narcissist knows this or not, that they then suddenly at some point withdraw and stop the love bombing, and your brain is so primed for
Yeah.
that, for the love bombing to be happening, that when it's suddenly withdrawn, you feel like desperate to get it back. And so that desperation that I experienced within the first probably 4 months of the relationship, that should have been a red flag to me very quickly, and especially, being given the silent treatment. That was another red flag very early on. And there was often gaslighting, and there were some things that I experienced in the relationship that I don't know if there are clinical terms for, but one thing that I noticed with this person was that an event would happen and they would retell the event in ways that were exaggerated. And I would think, gosh, that's not really what happened, but maybe we just have different perspectives. But that happened consistently. And I don't know that there's a term for that. Maybe it's grandiosity. But my intuition was always like, this is not okay. And what I know now is that narcissists lie, and they lie often. They lie with a straight face. They lie and tell you they're not lying. And so that was just a form of lying for that person, the exaggeration. And the exaggeration was often to serve their own needs or to get an emotional response from another person.
Well, one thing's for sure, when it comes to a narcissist, and if you find yourself in a relationship with a narcissist, I really think having a support person to help you get out or, navigate that, it's really important, because otherwise, it can go on possibly also for years like it did for you. I have another question for you. Do you think narcissists know that they are narcissists?
Yes, I do. At least the one that I was in a relationship with. I do think that that person knows that their behavior is not okay. But it's almost as if it's an addiction, like they can't stop, they can't change their behavior. And I think underneath it all, it's just too painful for them to acknowledge. It's too painful for them to acknowledge the hurt that they cause other people. And that's why so many of them don't change, because they're unwilling and unable to acknowledge how their behavior harms people.
Because then that would be a tremendous amount of guilt, emotion, and everything that they would have to deal with, because there was a certain agenda that they carried on of manipulation and, manipulation, bullying and whatever. That then that's probably why it becomes too much, too overbearing to change it. You also had mentioned that alcoholism was also part of your lessons throughout this whole time. What can you say about that?
My gut feeling was that my partner was an alcoholic, and other family members even said to me, I believe that this person is an alcoholic and needs help. And I thought, well, maybe I didn't really want to acknowledge it either. But one thing that I know now that I didn't understand then was that all the times that I would say, you have to stop drinking, or else this will happen. If you don't stop drinking, this will be the end of our relationship. What I was really asking that person to do was to take away their coping strategy, their coping mechanism, right? And so while it didn't make sense to me because I'm not an alcoholic, I don't experience addiction to alcohol or to any other drugs. I thought, like, why can't you just stop doing this? This would be what's best for everyone around us. And so I continued to feel hurt and injured and insulted by their inability or unwillingness to change their behavior. I thought it was as simple as that. But I understand now that the alcohol wasn't the problem per se. The alcohol for that person was a mechanism of dealing with the other problems. So to take that mechanism away and then leave that person with no coping strategies, no coping mechanisms wouldn't have necessarily been helpful either.
Yeah. Wow. Those were quite some lessons. You got some deep psychology through all of that experience, and good for you for getting out now and helping others with this very abusive, non-honoring, experience.
Yes.
Let's tell the audience how they can look you up on social media and find you.
Sure. Yeah. You're welcome to come connect with me on Facebook or Instagram. I'm at Dr. Danielle Angela in both of those places. I do share a lot about my own experience in my personal life as well as my business as well.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Angela, Danielle Angela, for coming on and for being so open and authentic with us about this, because I know there's many people out there that are in those kinds of relationships and are looking for a way out. And maybe today was the day that they feel the courage to make that call. Thank you so much. And I want to thank the audience for listening and tuning in today, and wish you a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you all again next Friday. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Kornelia Stephanie Show, Wake Up to Love, your call to action. Tune in each week on Transformation Talk Radio. Kornelia's joy is to engage others in practical ways, showing us how to live in the new earth in harmony with our true nature. For more information on Kornelia and her extraordinary work, or to listen to past shows, go to her website at korneliastephanie.com.